we're going to get started.
Jason in.
All right, right up front.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm glad somebody decided to come in the front here.
Get the courtside seats.
No problem. That's the throwing range.
So we're going to get started. Thank you all for coming. So a few logistical items. Food is outside if you haven't had a chance to grab it yet. We also have coffee and dessert about 2 o'clock, the right time in the office meet. And then we have a calling number, so if you have any colleagues who would want to join in and who are not here yet, the calling number and where we are webcasting is also over here. We will also be doing some of the live streaming, which means two things. You know, if you pick your nose, be careful. And then the second thing is that if anybody who could not be here today, but they want to listen into what Don and Brian and other people have to say, so they can join the live streaming, and that's the URL for live streaming. If you want to connect to the wireless, the ID is eBay guest, and the password is buy it now with the uppercase and lowercase the way it's spelled out. And I think the hashtag you just picked up OpenID Summit if you want to tweet it. And with that, I'm going to give it to Don. Thank you, Don.
Thank you, Ashish. Thank you, first and foremost, thank you to our host, PayPal. We are raffling off a PayPal parking lot later. Those of you that pay no, that space will have a guy's name on it called Andrew Nash. Don't worry about that at all. But thank you to Ashish for providing the energy and the impetus for us getting together, and to Andrew Nash, who is on the board of the Open Identity Foundation, as well as the Open Identity Exchange. And Andrew and PayPal are part of the leadership group of the OpenID Foundation, which is the co-host of this event. PayPal, Microsoft, Google, Ping Identity, Yahoo, who am I forgetting? Facebook.
That's an intentional.
That's right. All those companies, like PayPal, provide leadership for the foundation, and the foundation's work as a standards development organization focused on open identity and the internet. And this kind of interaction is a key part of what we try and do, which is to get small groups together of people that come from different parts of the industry, different pieces of technology and application sets, and really kind of open the hood and look at the state of identity in a particular sector. And in this sector, we're talking about retail. And we want to make sure that we spend the afternoon engaged in a focus on that topic. So why we're here is really threefold. The first and foremost is to meet people. We want to make sure that you've got some exposure to the companies of the representatives of companies that I just named, so that you can reach out to somebody at Microsoft or Google or Ping and begin to dialogue about what they're doing in this space and how you might learn more about that. I think that's one of the key outcomes that we're looking for. Again, the Open ID Summits are our working sessions, so we want you to come away with a sense of what's happening now, but also what the challenges are from an adoption perspective, from a security perspective, and to bring kind of a culture of clicks and conversion rates into the conversation about how standards like OpenID, both help and hinder those businesses and that technology deployment. So again, what I hope that we can get out of this is that you can meet new people, kind of hit the refresh button on your network contacts in the space, that you can get some exposure to where the OpenID standard is today and where it's going in the near future. And again, to kind of engage this conversation with folks in the retail and e-commerce sector in standards development around identity, standards development that really does have an important impact on issues of security and global adoption of this thing called OpenID. So with that, I'm going to ask Andrew to come up and say a few prayers over our meal here. And again, just to repeat our thanks for Ashish, for Andrew, and for the PayPal team to be hosts for this event and their support of the foundation and OpenID.
So I suspect that if I was to give the opening prayer over the lunch, that it would probably burst into flames. So it's probably not a bit good.
Just to kick off, I wanted to talk to you from a conceptual level about what appears to be happening in the identity space, some of the players are going on, maybe use it as a context to actually establish some of the conversation today. You know, feel free to throw rocks at it or complain about the fact that it may or may not be appropriate. It's just a way to actually help us get started in some of this space. So, oh look, like resolution is working wonderfully. So the context that we have right at the moment is that as we kicked off in the consumer identity space, we began to look probably 4 or 5 years ago particularly at the fact that we had two major disciplines of ways of thought about it. Lots of consumers and lots of service providers that were actually playing in the market space. You can see if these slides actually work from this point. We then promulgated this view that, well, there are large collections of identities that actually exist or potentially could exist. We had some viewpoints early days, particularly in OpenID, that we could be our own providers of identity, that we can represent ourselves as an entry point for beginning to actually perform identity-related tasks and services and transactions. Right at the moment, we're seeing the emergence of large-scale identity services and providers in various forms around the place. Some are represented here, we're going to hear from today. And then, as we began talking to people, it became clear that there was this other group. And so there are collections of people that know lots about us, that actually have information that's interesting and relevant, but they're not necessarily identity services or identity providers in the sense that they didn't have relationships with consumers. And so if you use your favorite credit service provider, for example, they know lots and lots about us. The relationship that they have with consumers is non-existent. And so anyone that claims that they were representative as an identity provider, those folks that we had conversations with soon came to the conclusion that, well, maybe we're not actually in the business of providing identities, but we sure have an awful lot of claims that would be interesting to share. And so credit rating providers, market information providers, there's a whole host of folks that fit into this kind of category. And there are a range of others, financial institutions, commercial entities, retailers generally, service providers, social networks. Whether or not they're actually the primary provider of identity, there are lots of interesting claims, attributes, generally identity information that's available around the place that would be neat and useful if we could actually utilize. The big advance in the consumer identity space is we said, that's great, but in order to give consumers the ability to control whether or not you see that information, for a bunch of reasons, not the least of which is the federal government is about to beat up on all of this if we're not really careful about how we share this stuff. But also to avoid issues like the creepy factors, like, well, where the hell did you find out that piece of information? And how do you know that's me and that I care about that? And so we began to run into these issues a couple of years ago where knowing too much was potentially bad. Putting consumers in a position where they knew what was happening and an ability to control that turned out to be an interesting way to avoid that. Plus, it gave you the capacity to create privacy-enhancing technology. What's begun to emerge over the last 12, 18 months, however, is this sort of last player, and you can combine these in lots of different ways. Some of them are all resonant in one place. In fact, there may be a perspective here that PayPal occupies all of them at some level. This concept of claims broker. So if you had all these people out there that had interesting information, and all these people had interesting identities, wouldn't it be neat if you could work out how to extract the bits that were useful, present them in a way that had like standard interfaces or ability to deliver this stuff, and then make them available to services in an interesting way. And so we're just beginning to see claims brokers beginning to turn up in this whole mix, and there are interesting opportunities there. How do you get service level agreements, retailers, for example, about access to information? How do you have a place you could go to that would actually aggregate lots of information? So there's some interesting potential there. Here's the view that seems to be valid from the service or merchant perspective, particularly on the internet. You have someone that comes to the front door of our websites or retail stores, and they form some set of interactions that are actually going to involve shopping at some point, and then you go to checkout. For those of us who are heavily involved in this space, the thing that we often care about are issues like, can I convert the engagement of my consumers in a way that will actually get more revenue out of this? And part of the equation for that is often is how do